Ben McLemore. The assault happened back in early October of 2021 at a house party in Lake Oswego, Oregon, hosted by Robert Covington. The victim, a 21-year-old woman, had been drinking heavily, passed out around 2 in the morning, and came to hours later to find McLemore on top of her. The case dragged on for years, but a Clackamas County grand jury finally indicted him in February of 2024. The charges included first-degree rape, first-degree unlawful sexual penetration, and 2 counts of second-degree sexual abuse. McLemore got arrested in April of that year at Portland International Airport, where U.S. Marshals picked him up. The trial took place in June of 2025, and the jury convicted him on 3 of the 4 charges. He was found guilty of rape, unlawful sexual penetration, and 1 count of sexual abuse. He was acquitted of the second abuse charge. The judge sentenced him on July 9th to 100 months in Oregon State Prison. That's just over 8 years. He's also got about 12 years of supervision once he gets out, and he's got to register as a sex offender. Prosecutors credited the victim's courage in coming forward, calling it a message that this behavior won't be tolerated. She called the past few years the longest of her life and said she only spoke up to make sure he was held accountable. Meanwhile, McLemore's attorney tried to paint it as a short, alcohol-fueled encounter. He said he thought it was consensual. The jury didn't agree, and now he's sitting in prison because of it. Terrence Jones. Back in the early morning of July 31st, 2013, just after 2 o'clock, police were clearing people out from outside a club in Portland's Old Town when they saw Jones walking with a group. He was 21, fresh into the league with Houston. A police sergeant saw Jones walk by a doorway where 2 homeless men were sleeping. Jones yelled, "Wake up!" and stomped on the leg of one of them. Officers stopped the group half a block away and arrested him. He ended up in Multnomah County Jail on a Class B misdemeanor harassment charge, but got released on his own recognizance. The victim, Daniel Kelleher, was 46, and luckily only had a minor leg injury. He didn't even need medical care. Jones pleaded not guilty in court, and his next court date was set for September 6th. Later that year, the charge was dropped entirely. His lawyer, Kevin O'Connell, claimed Jones didn't stomp anyone and said the whole thing would blow over. And technically, it did, but there were a lot of eyewitnesses who said they've seen it. Jones was born January 9th, 1992, right there in Portland. He went to Jefferson High and then played 2 years at Kentucky before getting drafted 18th overall in 2012 by Houston. At the time of this mess, he was still in his rookie season, playing just 19 games and averaging 5.5 points. So the whole thing ended up being a weird, ugly moment in public, but it never made it past that misdemeanor charge. No injuries that required treatment, no trial, and no conviction. Definitely not a highlight for him, but not a career ender either. Karl Malone, when he was 20 and still at Louisiana Tech, he impregnated a 13-year-old named Gloria Bell. She was reportedly a family friend from his hometown of Summerfield, Louisiana. No criminal charges were filed because her family thought prison time would prevent him from helping financially. In 1986, Bell's family took him to court for paternity and child support. Malone didn't respond at first, but a judge ordered payments after a paternity test confirmed he was the father. He was supposed to pay $125 a week and cover medical expenses. Instead, he reached a private settlement between 1988 and 1989. Around that same time, another case popped up involving twins Daryl and Cheryl Ford. Malone had fathered them when he and their mother were both 17. He settled that one privately too. Despite being the father, he had no relationship with Demetress Bell, the son from the case with Gloria Bell. When they finally met, Malone reportedly told him it was too late to be a father. Years later, around 2014, they started rebuilding their relationship, and by 2018, they were regularly in contact. In 2023, Louisiana Tech unveiled a statue of Malone. Not surprisingly, it sparked backlash. People questioned why someone with his past deserved public praise. Malone said he didn't care about the criticism and refused to talk about it further. Off the court, his behavior drew more fire. He was known for elbowing opponents during games and faced accusations of harassing Vanessa Bryant after his playing days were over. Between his history with minors, violent playing style, and post-career drama, Malone's public image has taken a serious hit, and he's shown no real interest in fixing it. Miles Bridges. On June 29, 2022, he was arrested in Los Angeles after allegedly assaulting his girlfriend, Michelle Johnson, while their 2 children were present. The district attorney filed 3 felony charges, 1 for injuring the parent of a child and 2 for child abuse under conditions likely to cause serious harm. He posted a $130,000 bond and was released. A few weeks later, he was formally charged and pleaded not guilty. On November 3rd, Bridges took a plea deal. He pleaded no contest to the felony count for injuring a child's parent. The other 2 charges were dismissed. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation with no jail time. Plus, he had to complete 52 weeks of domestic violence counseling, 52 weeks of parenting classes, 100 hours of community service, and weekly drug tests. Marijuana use was only allowed with a prescription. He was also fined and placed under a 10-year protective order that barred him from contacting the victim or getting within 100 yards. The NBA responded with a 30-game suspension. 20 of those were credited from the previous season, and he served 10 more to start 2024. Then came October 6, 2023. Bridges was accused of violating the protective order by causing property damage and committing misdemeanor child abuse during another incident. He turned himself in a week later, posted a $1,000 bond, and received a criminal summons. But in February 2024, all 3 North Carolina charges were dropped because of inconsistent statements from the victim. So while Bridges avoided jail, the felony plea and multiple allegations still led to league punishment and left a stain on his record that no stat sheet will erase. Willie Reed. In the early hours of August 6, 2017, he was arrested at a Miami condo after an argument with his wife turned physical. According to the police report, things escalated when Reed allegedly dragged her across the apartment during a fight over her purse. She also said he grabbed her by the hair, twisted her wrist, and tore her shirt while she tried to leave with their child. Emergency responders documented red marks on her wrist, back, chest, and right biceps. Reed told officers he didn't hit her, but did admit to pulling at her shirt and grabbing her purse. He was booked at 3 a.m. on a misdemeanor domestic battery charge. The case landed under the NBA's newly adopted domestic violence policy from late 2016, making him likely the first player investigated under that framework. Later, Reed's wife tried to walk it all back. Her lawyer said she never called the police herself and claimed the incident had been blown out of proportion. She asked that the charges be dropped entirely. Still, the league handed down its own punishment. In early 2018, the NBA suspended Reed for 6 games without pay. The combination of visible injuries, his partial admission, and the police documentation all factored into how the league responded. Even though his wife softened her stance, the NBA made it clear they'd treat the incident seriously. It definitely left a mark on Reed's reputation and career. He didn't face jail time, but the league suspension and public fallout were a heavy price. His situation turned into an early test case for the NBA's new approach to handling domestic violence among active players. Kevin Porter Jr. On September 11, 2023, he was arrested in New York City at the Millennium Hilton Hotel near the United Nations after allegedly attacking his girlfriend, former WNBA player Kizri Gondrezic. Prosecutors said he punched her repeatedly, left her with a gash above her eye, and squeezed her neck so hard it restricted her breathing. She eventually escaped the room, covered in blood. Hospital scans showed a fractured vertebra in her neck and facial injury. Investigators also said that before this incident, Porter had rammed his car into hers during a separate argument. He was arraigned later that day and released on $75,000 bail with a protection order issued against him. At first, he faced felony assault and strangulation charges, but in October, the assault charge was dropped after doctors said the neck fracture was actually a congenital issue and not caused by him. He still faced the other charges and kept pleading not guilty. Then came the plea deal in January 2024. Porter pleaded guilty to misdemeanor reckless assault and a second-degree harassment violation. The terms? Complete a 26-week intervention program, avoid getting arrested again, and respect the protection order. If he follows the rules for a year, he can withdraw the plea and get his record cleared. This wasn't his first problem. In November 2020, he got arrested after a crash in Cleveland. Cops found weed and a loaded gun, but no indictment followed. In April 2021, he got hit with a $50,000 fine for breaking COVID protocols at a strip club. In January 2022, the Rockets suspended him 1 game for a locker room outburst. The team dumped him in October 2023, and the Thunder waived him the same day. Jason Richardson. On April 29, 2003, he was arrested in Saginaw, Michigan, after a violent confrontation with his ex-girlfriend, Rashonda Jackman. The incident happened inside her apartment while their 3-year-old daughter was in the home. According to police, Richardson shoved Jackman so hard into a wall that it broke. There was a visible hole left behind. Jackman told authorities that after pushing her, he stepped over her to reach their daughter and kicked her in the left side. Richardson denied kicking her and claimed it was self-defense. He said Jackman swung at him first, which caused her to hit the wall. He admitted to grabbing their daughter, but denied any intentional aggression beyond trying to protect himself. A Michigan jury didn't buy that story. After about an hour and a half of deliberation, they found him guilty of misdemeanor domestic violence. Following the conviction, Richardson faced a sentence that included up to 93 days in jail and a $500 fine. His bail had been set at $5,000. The NBA responded quickly, suspending him for 3 games without pay. That decision came down as part of their disciplinary process in reaction to his criminal conviction. Richardson issued a public statement saying he regretted the entire situation and accepted the consequences. He acknowledged the embarrassment it caused for his family, his team, and the league, but no statement erased the facts. The broken wall, the testimony from Jack Payne, and the presence of their young daughter all painted a disturbing picture. The NBA made its disciplinary move, but the incident remains a documented stain on his career. Kermit Washington. On May 25, 2016, he was federally indicted in Missouri for embezzling around $500,000 from Project Contact Africa, a charity he founded. Prosecutors said he lied to donors, promised full proceeds would help African children, then funneled the money into his own lifestyle. The charges included tax fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, obstruction, and wire fraud involving eBay and PayPal. He pleaded guilty on December 4, 2017 to 3 federal counts, 2 for filing false statements on his taxes and 1 for aggravated identity theft. That last one came from him using someone else's name and address to keep the charity legally registered so he could keep raising money. In July 2018, he was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $967,158 in restitution. Where did the money go? Prosecutors said he spent it on personal expenses, vacations, rent, and plastic surgery for his girlfriend. He also ran a fake charity eBay store, exploiting the tax-exempt status to avoid seller fees, costing eBay and PayPal nearly $908,000. As if that wasn't enough, he arranged shady referral deals with a lawyer named Ronald Jack Mix. Athletes got steered to Mix, who donated over $150,000 to the charity as part of a kickback scheme. Washington pocketed that too. The courts didn't offer parole. He served the full sentence and got released in October 2022. All of it, the lies, the fraud, the identity theft, was confirmed through court records and official Department of Justice filing. Washington used a charitable front to enrich himself, and it caught up with him in a big way. Lance Stevenson. Back in October 2008, he was arrested at age 18 for groping a 17-year-old girl inside his high school. He was originally hit with a Class B misdemeanor for sexual assault. That case didn't go to trial. He ended up pleading guilty to a reduced charge of disorderly conduct, so it stayed on the books, but without the original assault label. Then 2 years later, things got worse. On August 15, 2010, police said he pushed his girlfriend, Jasmine Williams, down a concrete stairwell in Brooklyn. The report claimed he followed that up by grabbing her head and slamming it into the bottom step. She suffered back and head injuries with possible damage to her neck. He was arrested and charged with third-degree assault, menacing, reckless endangerment, and harassment. The prosecutor requested $7,500 bail, but Stevenson was released without it. Despite how severe the injuries sounded, the case didn't stick. It ended up getting dismissed. No conviction came from it, but at the time, Pacers president Larry Bird called the whole situation disappointing and said the organization was taking a closer look at the facts. That didn't stop Stevenson from continuing his career in the league, but the accusations left a definite stain on his early reputation. So between the school incident and the stairwell arrest, Stevenson's early years were shadowed by legal trouble. 1 guilty plea for disorderly conduct, 1 dismissed case involving serious allegations of domestic violence. No prison time, no convictions on the assault charges, but the details from both incidents were disturbing enough to follow him for years. Tom Payne. His criminal history spans 4 decades, with 3 separate rape convictions in 3 different states. In May 1972, he was convicted of raping a woman in Georgia. He served 5 years in prison there before being transferred to Kentucky to face additional charges. By the late 1970s, Payne was convicted again, this time in Kentucky for rape and sodomy. That conviction led to around 6 years behind bars, and he was paroled in 1983. Then came another arrest in February 1986 in Los Angeles. Payne was accused of forcibly raping a woman and was later convicted. He served more than 10 years in a California prison. After his release, he violated parole and got sent back to Kentucky, where the state gave him a life sentence. He spent about 32 years in prison there before finally getting paroled in November 2018. Add it all up, and Payne spent roughly 44 years incarcerated. That includes 5 in Georgia, 6 in Kentucky, over 10 in California, and more than 3 decades back in Kentucky for the parole violation. This wasn't some single, isolated case. These were repeat convictions across multiple states, backed by court rulings, prison time, and official records. Before all of this, he was the first black player at the University of Kentucky, and even played briefly for the Atlanta Hawks during the 1971-72 NBA season. But his post-NBA life was defined almost entirely by violent crimes against women, confirmed by legal outcomes in Georgia, Kentucky, and California. Not opinion, just a verified record of repeated convictions and a decades-long prison timeline. Ralph Samson. Back in April 2003, he pled guilty in federal court to a misdemeanor for failing to pay more than $22,000 in court-ordered child support. That case revealed something even bigger. By then, he reportedly owed close to $300,000 for 2 children from different mothers in Northern Virginia. He faced up to 6 months in jail for the misdemeanor, along with a $5,000 fine and probation. Things escalated in 2006. Samson pled guilty to 1 count of mail fraud. That charge stemmed from using the mail during the purchase of a $43,000 SUV. Prosecutors said he misrepresented his income and assets to make it seem like he couldn't afford to meet his child support obligations. That little stunt landed him a 2-month sentence in federal prison. The court let him delay reporting to prison until April 2007 so he could handle personal business first. As part of the plea deal, more serious charges, like perjury and making false financial statements, were dropped. He agreed to settle the full $300,000 child support debt, which the court accepted under the terms of the agreement. Judge James Spencer presided over the case and said Samson wasn't avoiding payments out of malice, but because he simply couldn't afford them. He pointed to Samson's charitable work and financial decline as reasons for leniency. Still, none of that erased the fact that Samson, a former NBA All-Star and public figure, ended up in federal prison for fraud, 2 months behind bars, a massive child support debt, and a federal conviction. All of it publicly documented and confirmed through court records. Glenn Robinson. On July 20th, 2002, he got into a physical altercation with his then-fiancée, Jonta French, at her home in Chicago Heights, Illinois. The incident led to charges of domestic battery and assault being filed in Cook County. Nearly a year later, on May 16, 2003, Robinson was convicted on both counts. Instead of jail time, the court handed him a probationary sentence, though specific terms weren't publicly disclosed. This was the only documented case of domestic violence tied to Robinson, and it stemmed entirely from that single confrontation. There haven't been any additional public allegations or legal actions related to domestic violence since then, but that doesn't make this one go away. The case was prosecuted, went to trial, and ended with a guilty verdict. It wasn't some tossed complaint, it stuck. Despite the conviction, Robinson continued his NBA career without interruption. The league didn't issue a suspension or public penalty, and the team didn't take disciplinary action either. That era saw a very different approach to off-court conduct from both the league and franchises. The facts remain: a physical incident with his fiancée, 2 charges, a courtroom conviction, and a sentence that avoided prison, but still confirmed his guilt. It wasn't swept under the rug, but it also didn't draw much national scrutiny. That's the full picture. 1 confirmed case, legal consequences, and no public repeat offense since. Ben Gordon. In October 2022, he was arrested at LaGuardia Airport for punching his 10-year-old son multiple times in the face. The child had a protective order against him that had been in place since 2018. Gordon was hit with a long list of charges: 2 counts of second-degree assault, third-degree assault, resisting arrest, criminal contempt, endangering a child, and attempted assault. He didn't go quietly. He allegedly injured 2 Port Authority officers during the arrest. Everyone involved sustained minor injuries. Just 1 month later, he was back in the headlines. This time, it was at a McDonald's in Chicago, where he reportedly assaulted 2 security guards. One was punched, and both were thrown to the ground. Police charged him with misdemeanor battery causing bodily harm. These weren't isolated outbursts either. In 2017, he had a string of incidents. In October, he pulled multiple fire alarms in his Los Angeles apartment building. Then in November, he assaulted an apartment manager in Charlotte, pulled a knife, and stole his security deposit. He was arrested and released on $50,000 bail. In December, he was detained in Mount Vernon for a psychiatric evaluation after an incident at a wellness center involving a female patron. Then came April 2023. On his 40th birthday, Gordon was arrested at a juice shop in Stamford, Connecticut for erratic behavior. Police found brass knuckles, a folding knife, and a stun gun in his backpack. He was placed in an 18-month probation program, with the option to dismiss the charges if he complies with mental health requirements. Across these incidents, legal and medical professionals have pointed to his struggles with bipolar disorder and depression, something he's actively addressing through therapy and treatment. Dennis Rodman, his legal record is basically a running ad for court-mandated probation. Starting with the DUIs, he pleaded guilty to drunk driving back in July 2000 and again in December 2003. Both cases ended with probation and fines. Then in January 2018, he got arrested again for DUI in Newport Beach. He failed both the sobriety and breath tests. The result? 2 misdemeanor charges, 3 years of informal probation, and an alcohol treatment program. That wasn't his only time driving poorly. In November 2016, Rodman drove the wrong way on Interstate 5 in Santa Ana and got hit with a hit-and-run charge. He pleaded guilty again, received another round of 3 years probation, and was sentenced to 30 hours of community service. So basically, just a pattern of avoiding jail by nodding through courtrooms and collecting probation like trading cards. Now on to the domestic violence cases. In April 2004, Rodman was arrested for assaulting then-partner Gina Peterson. He pleaded no contest to misdemeanor spousal battery and was given 3 years of probation, 45 hours of community service, and a full year of domestic violence counseling. That same year, his ex-wife Michelle Moyer was granted a restraining order based on claims of threats and physical abuse. So to sum it up, 3 DUIs, a hit and run, and a domestic battery conviction, all tied up with a neat little bow of probation and court orders. No jail time, no long-term consequences, legally speaking, but the paper trail's there, and the pattern's hard to miss. The legal system let him walk, but the incidents keep stacking, like bad decisions at a Vegas hotel. DeAndre Liggins. On August 31st, 2013, he was arrested in Oklahoma City after a brutal assault on his girlfriend, all while their 2-year-old son was present. The police affidavit said he punched her repeatedly in the head, dragged her out of bed by her hair, stomped on her, and dropped both an Xbox and a box fan on her head. Officers reported visible injuries to her head, neck, back, and arms. The allegations included not just physical violence, but destruction and terror right in front of a child. Liggins was booked on serious felony charges: domestic assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, domestic abuse in the presence of a minor, kidnapping, and violating a protective order. He posted an $8,000 bond and got released, but his career took a hit immediately. On September 6th, just days after the arrest, the Oklahoma City Thunder waived him. The case took a turn in February 2014. Prosecutors dropped the felony charges and accepted a misdemeanor plea for domestic abuse. They reportedly considered refiling the felony counts, but couldn't move forward without the victim's cooperation. Instead of jail, Liggins was ordered to complete domestic violence counseling and community service. Despite how violent the incident was described in reports, his legal outcome didn't include any time behind bars. Still, the fallout was clear. He lost his roster spot in the NBA and had to claw his way back through overseas leagues and the development league. The league never issued a suspension, but the Thunder's decision and the charges themselves made it clear this was far from minor. The incident stands as one of the most disturbing domestic cases involving a player in recent memory, with court records and police evidence backing up every claim. Jackson Hayes. On July 28, 2021, LAPD responded to a domestic disturbance at his home in Woodland Hills. His girlfriend's cousin had called 911, reporting Hayes was being loud and violent. Officers found him outside the residence, and things escalated fast. He refused to stay outside, questioned their authority, and tried to re-enter the house. The officers took him down. Body cam footage showed one officer briefly kneeling near his neck as Hayes shouted that he couldn't breathe. He was tased twice, once in the chest and again in the buttocks, before being handcuffed. He was treated for minor injuries, and one officer reportedly hurt his elbow during the scuffle. He was charged with 12 misdemeanors, including domestic battery, false imprisonment, resisting arrest, battery on an officer, and trespassing. On February 24th, 2022, he took a plea deal. Hayes pleaded no contest to resisting an officer and false imprisonment. He avoided jail, but got slapped with 3 years of probation, 450 hours of community service, and a full year of weekly domestic violence counseling. He was also ordered to pay restitution. Then in November 2024, new surveillance footage surfaced. TMZ leaked video showing Hayes in a confrontation with his ex-girlfriend, Sophia Jamora. The video shows him pulling her at the doorway, pushing her and spitting at her while she shouted, "What the f do I look like? A punching bag?" The footage added fuel to the fire and triggered the NBA to reopen its investigation. At that point, Both Hayes and the Lakers began cooperating. Jamora's legal team said they hadn't been contacted by the league until after the footage dropped. So even after the plea, the story didn't close. The NBA is now taking another look. Jeff Adrien, on December 7th, 2015, he was arrested in West Hollywood after allegedly stealing a Mercedes-Benz from a hotel valet stand. According to reports, he took the car without the proper documentation, went on a 6-hour joyride, and then casually returned it like nothing happened. LAPD's Hollywood division wasn't amused. They arrested him on felony grand theft auto charges and booked him into jail. He got released later that day after posting $25,000 bail. But the owner of the car wasn't exactly thrilled to get it back. The vehicle had visible damage and reportedly smelled like marijuana. So not only did it go missing for hours, it came back beat up and reeking. The case didn't vanish quietly either. At the time of the arrest, it remained open, and there weren't immediate public updates about a resolution. No charges were dropped right away, and there was no dismissal announced in the early coverage. It was a straight-up felony charge for taking a luxury car without permission and returning it like it was a library book. Late, damaged, and slightly smoked out. Adrien had bounced around a few NBA rosters before the arrest, but nothing about this stunt helped his career. A joyride in a stranger's Mercedes might sound like a bad movie subplot, but for Adrien, it ended with flashing lights and a felony booking. Everything about this case was real, confirmed by LAPD and reported by ESPN, NBC Sports, and other outlets. And yes, the car really did smell like weed. Trevor Ariza. In February 2023, his estranged wife, Bree Anderson, filed for a restraining order, accusing him of physical and verbal abuse during their marriage. She claimed he had choked her until she passed out and punched her multiple times, sometimes in front of their kids, 12-year-old Tristan and 10-year-old Taylor. The court granted a temporary order, forcing Trevor to stay 100 yards away, surrender 2 AR-15 rifles and 2 Glocks, and accept supervised visitation with his children for just 4 hours a week. Not long after, Trevor filed his own restraining order against Anderson, saying she had been violent with him. He claimed she once ripped out his dreadlocks during a confrontation. The dueling filings painted a messy, hostile dynamic, with both sides trading accusations of domestic abuse. These weren't Trevor's first brushes with custody disputes. In 2019, another ex accused him of child abuse, but a judge dismissed that restraining order and found no physical abuse had occurred. That case didn't result in charges either. Back to 2023, these new allegations didn't lead to criminal charges, but they played out in civil court. A hearing was scheduled in March to decide whether the temporary orders would become permanent. By October, reports showed that both orders had been dissolved as part of a divorce settlement agreement, so the courtroom battle ended without long-term restrictions, but the public record still includes serious allegations, firearm surrender, and documented claims of violence in front of children, all verified through court filings and major outlets. Ruben Patterson. In September 2000, he was accused of forcing his 24-year-old nanny to perform oral sex. He didn't admit guilt, but in May 2001, he entered an offered plea to third-degree attempted rape. That means he didn't contest the evidence, but didn't admit the act. He got a 15-day sentence that was served through house arrest or work release, and the rest of a year-long term was suspended. He was also required to register as a sex offender in multiple states. Just a few months later, in February 2001, he got hit with a misdemeanor assault conviction after attacking a man in Cleveland who had scratched his car. The violence didn't stop there. In 2002, Patterson was arrested on felony domestic abuse charges involving his wife. She later dropped the charges, but the two divorced. In May 2007, he failed to register as a sex offender after moving to Cincinnati. He entered a no-contest plea and was fined $1,000. Then in March 2010, he was arrested for DUI. His blood alcohol level tested at 0.117, well above the legal limit. The court fined him $500, ordered him into a 3-day driving program, and required 18 months of alcohol abstinence. And in April 2019, he pleaded guilty to failing to pay over $100,000 in child support. That debt had piled up over time, and reports say he's now making payments. The timeline stretches across nearly 2 decades. 1 sexual offense, multiple assaults, a DUI, registration violations, and child support evasion. Each one confirmed by legal records, media reports, and court outcomes. Darren Collison. On May 30th, 2016, police responded to a domestic violence call at his home in Granite Bay, California. His wife had called in, and when deputies arrived, they saw visible injuries on her. Collison was arrested and charged with 2 misdemeanors, one for inflicting injury on a spouse and one for domestic battery. He also picked up a 3rd charge for driving on a suspended license, though that wasn't related to the incident itself. A few months later, on September 2nd, Collison pleaded guilty to the domestic battery charge. As part of the plea deal, he was sentenced to 20 days in jail, but that time could be served through community service instead. The court also gave him 3 years of informal probation, ordered him to complete a 52-week domestic violence program, and required 20 hours of additional community service. The other charges were dropped in exchange for the plea. Then in October, the NBA stepped in. They suspended him for 8 games without pay to start the 2016 to 2017 season. That was their response to the domestic violence case and part of the league's disciplinary policy for off-court conduct. This wasn't a situation that dragged through court appeals or stayed in the headlines for years. Collison admitted guilt, took the sentence, and served the punishment, but it still marked a serious moment in his career. The legal outcome, the league suspension, and the public record all stem from one confirmed act of domestic battery, all of it verified by court filings and official league statements. Greg Oden. On August 7, 2014, he was arrested just after 3 in the morning at his mother's house in Lawrence, Indiana. Police responded to a disturbance and found his ex-girlfriend with a bloody, swollen face. She had lacerations around her nose and forehead, and the room looked like it had been torn apart. A friend at the scene backed up her account, and Oden was taken into custody on 2 preliminary misdemeanor battery charges. His bond was set at $10,000. Things got worse legally after that. Prosecutors upgraded the charges to include 1 felony count of battery causing serious bodily injury. They also tacked on 2 misdemeanor charges, one for domestic battery and one for battery causing bodily harm. If convicted on the felony, Oden was looking at up to 6 years behind bars. Oden told officers, "Things got out of control. I swung my arms to move them out of the way, then punched her in the face. I was wrong, and I know what has to happen." That admission was part of the official police report. He didn't deny hitting her. He acknowledged it outright. By February 2015, Oden pleaded guilty to a reduced charge, misdemeanor battery resulting in moderate bodily injury. The felony and other charges were dropped as part of the deal. He avoided jail time, instead getting probation, a fine, and mandatory counseling. This wasn't a rumor or a misunderstanding. It was a violent assault that left visible injuries and resulted in a public guilty plea. Everything was confirmed in court, documented by police, and reported across major outlets. He walked away without prison time, but the record is permanent.